Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast. Ozcast. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Head into your local Safeway for great spring savings throughout the store. This week at Safeway, get yellow peaches or nectarines for the member price of $1.88 per pound. Also this week at Safeway, value packs of Signature Farms chicken drumsticks, thighs, leg quarters, or picnic packs are buy one, get one free. Plus, get value packs of USDA choice boneless beef top sirloin steak for the member price of $4.99 per pound. Visit Safeway.com, download the Safeway for You app, or head in store to find more great deals at Safeway.
Ozcast.
Welcome to Strategicon.
Hello world, I'm John Bruni and you're listening to Strategicon, your window to all things security and foreign affairs. We've had a bit of a break from podcasting. This had a lot to do with the ongoing development of our NewsSage International website, as well as continuing work on project development. Unfortunately, we won't be joined by either David or Tim today because of other commitments, so I'll be flying solo on this episode. But what an episode this will be. You'll recall that we at Strategicon have been keeping a watching brief on events in Ethiopia, a country that is one of Africa's key strategic players and could become an energy powerhouse, but for the internal problems the country currently faces with regard to ethnic extremism and a lack of modern unifying nationalism. To discuss this latter point, today we are joined by Dr. Yonas Adeto. Yonas is Director of International Peace and Security Studies at Addis Ababa University, Ethiopia. The IPSS is the premier institute for education, research, and policy dialogues on peace and security in Africa. Yonas, welcome to Strategicon.
John, thank you very much for having me.
I suppose we should get the hard question out first. The election of Dr. Abiy Ahmed in April of 2018 wasn't just an election of a prime minister, but it signified a major shift ethnically within Ethiopia, replacing the ruling minority ethnic group, the Tigray, with the majority groups of the Oromo and the Amharic. If we speak about ethnic extremism in Ethiopia, was the nature of the state always imperiled by how the patchwork of ethnic groups held together?
John, thank you very much indeed. Just may I add to amplify the context in Ethiopia. Ethiopia is more than simply Amhara and Oromo, but we have also Afar, Somali, Benishangul, southern peoples altogether, Gambela and Afar, which is a cradle of human beings, and Tigray as well. So these are all combined, constitute Ethiopia.
Yeah.
So Dr. Abiy Ahmed's come to power on the 2nd of April 2018 definitely is a landmark or hallmark on Ethiopian history, simply because the preceding TPLF-led EPRDF, I think I should make it clear, TPLF, Tigray People Liberation Front, led what's called the coalition EPRDF, Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front. So underline revolutionary there. And so this basically started in a jungle as a rebel movement for about 17 years prior to the end of Cold War, that is 1989, 1990. And in cooperation with other allies, it overthrew the Ethiopian government, the legitimate government of the military government, called sometimes in Amharic DERG, D-E-R-G. And after having overthrown, it replaced it, that is TPLF-led EPRDF, altogether remapped Ethiopia on the basis of ethnicity, sometimes referred also as ethno-linguistic political system. So John, you are identified not as John, a human being, John, Australian or British or American, but just go back to clan base. And that clannish, putting clan first, made most people, as well as the land itself, just belong, sort of primordial substance. So, in other words, the political system ethnicized politics, politicized ethnicity. To unpack it, if you are an Oromo, then no any other people must be in Oromia. Oromo should belong to Oromia. Somali, Amhara should be for Amhara. Southern part for South. Hence, no movement, no national feeling, as you said, no Ethiopianism. So the Ethiopianism was substituted by clan or ethnic feelings. And that fueled already divided society into further contradictions and conflicts. 2018, 2019 saw masses of Ethiopian people, IDPs, internally displaced people, millions of Oromos, because they belonged to only Oromos, then they had to be pushed from Somali region and Somali from Oromia. Most of the time, the targeted population was Amhara. So Amhara was to be depopulated, to be uprooted from where they lived for centuries, to be honest, with South, with Western, with Oromo, with Walaita, with Sidama, with... Then they had to go simply because they were labeled as Amhara, then they had to be either killed or their properties altogether burnt, confiscated, and that definitely, the very political culture, political system, which brought by EPRDF, TPLF-led EPRDF, brought this confusion in the country. And after 27 years, when Dr. Abiy came to power, then you see this sea change, the entire change that is coming back to we are Ethiopians. Yes, we are Oromos, yes, we are Walaitas, yes, we are Amharas, but at the same time, we are Ethiopian. Unless we are united together, we can't defeat poverty. We can always remain forever poor. So the best for us is to come together and fight this poverty first. And of course, let's feel we are Africans, we are human beings, we are more than the clan. So that was a basic philosophy subsumed under a term called Maddamar in Amharic, or synergy, which came with Dr. Abiy to power. So, John, to answer your question precisely there, then that 2018 election of Dr. Abiy as Prime Minister definitely changed Ethiopian history. I would say paradigm shift from ethnic-oriented to, as you precisely said, national-oriented state building and nation building.
Yonas, from a historic perspective, what accounts for the lack of what we in the West would call modern nationalism in Ethiopia? And why was it not adopted earlier to tamp down internal ethnic nationalisms?
Very good. There's no country in the world with perfect governance. No country, to be honest. But even before TPLF came to power, during the military government, there were definitely discontents. And during Haile Selassie, there were discontents. There were, for instance, languages were not equally treated. Definitely, Amharic only, rather than having alternative languages. But should that really take you to the level of saying secession from the country? Should you fragment the entire country? Shouldn't you really come together and discuss it, restructure it? Is there any country without such problems, to be honest? If we come to your great country, 1998, when you had what's called National Sorry Day, when you were just making excellent reconciliation with through the then Prime Minister, the National Sorry Day with Aborigines, that lost generation, that you have that terminology. So how you just then rebuild your country. The same is true with Ethiopia, to be honest. Isn't it possible to address those discontents, those grievances and marginalizations through discussions, rather than going to the jungle and massacring each other and committing crimes against the national army, northern army of Ethiopia, which of course comprised of about 90 ethnic groups altogether, only just in the northern part, keeping the safety and security of the country overnight, being maimed and massacred by TPLF. Should that really lead you to that level? Sure, there were discontents, differences, grievances, which could easily be addressed through national consensus, negotiations, discussions, without fighting. Isn't it possible through talking, as you did, as many other countries really did? So, John, to be honest, to be fair, to be frank with our discussions, there were student movements, where there were military movements, so as to address these issues, such as land to the tiller, because the land was occupied, or rather held by very limited people, which is sort of class struggle, to use Marxist terminology. And so that really brought the military government. Then the military government, when it failed to address those national questions, land resource questions, resource distribution questions, then ethnic-based thing came out to address these issues, as I'm sure I pointed out in my paper as well. But rather than addressing these issues, it was totally based on what's called revolutionary democracy, which I underlined earlier in the abbreviation of EPRDF. So that revolutionary democracy copied directly from Lenin's work and Stalin's work, which does not fit Ethiopia's traditional context, as we were talking about Abyssinian culture a moment ago. It doesn't really fit into Abyssinian culture, Ethiopian culture at all. As a result, you can see this movement, thank God Almighty now, that spirit of national feeling is coming back after this Prime Minister came to power.
Yonas, you made mention about the paper that you published. It's an excellent paper, and it's entitled Violent Ethnic Extremism in Ethiopia, Implications for the Stability of the Horn of Africa. Can you explain to our listeners why the internal problems in Ethiopia may threaten the stability of the Horn of Africa region?
Brilliant. John, in peace studies, in peace philosophy, we say peace is indivisible. We can't have only Australian peace or Ethiopian peace. If peace is disturbed in one country, it is a spillover effect could be felt somewhere else. Typical example is lack of peace in Afghanistan in 9/11 caused terrorism in Washington, in America. So this, if ethnic extremism flares up in Ethiopia, it has a destabilizing effect to the Horn of Africa in general, through refugees, through the flow of small arms and light weapons, through human trafficking, drug trafficking, arms trafficking, money laundering. The spillover effect, this spillover effect, this flow of this contagious nature of conflict definitely is a foundation for our philosophy of peace, that peace is indivisible. Your peace is my peace. So if peace is disturbed in one place, it has an impact immediately on the other place. To be very specific and to the point, Horn of Africa, you have Somali ethnic group in Ethiopia, Somali ethnic group in Djibouti, Somali ethnic group in Somalia. We have Afar in Eritrea, Afar in Djibouti, Afar in Ethiopia. If one Afar in Ethiopia is attacked, then you can see quick effects, quick response coming from Djibouti. My colleagues, my relatives are attacked from Eritrea. Then we have in Gambela, that is western part of Ethiopia, and Anywa in Sudan, and Anywa in Ethiopia, and where in South Sudan, and where in Ethiopia. Then, once one area is attacked, the other areas are also to suffer the consequence. So that is why I have to title it as Ethnic Extremism in Ethiopia with effect on the stability of the Horn of Africa.
Can we be sure that Ethiopia's struggle with current ethnic rebalancing is not being exacerbated by external forces which would benefit from seeing the end of social and economic progress in Ethiopia?
John, thank you. I can't thank you enough for hitting the nail on the head. That's exactly what's happening. And we already talked about holistic nature of conflict and peace. So as we took the example of Afghanistan affecting American security. So particularly as Ethiopia gathers momentum, gets stronger, other people think that Ethiopia is gaining ground, is going to claim hegemony. And so other countries, not neighboring Ethiopia, might not be aided on annual basis, as just some countries were definitely funded by Western countries for their role to play in Africa, particularly in the Middle East. So if Ethiopia grows stronger, then it might attract attention of the West. Therefore, the best way is to stop Ethiopia from growing, to destabilize Ethiopia, to fragment Ethiopia, because it is going to stand on its own feet. It's going to be independent. It is also because Ethiopia, as you can see, Abiy's vision is this RSC, Regional Security Complex, that is bringing Eritrea, Somalia, Djibouti, Ethiopia, Kenya, even South Sudan, you know, sort of what you call a regional economic community, getting even stronger. And this strength through particularly Great Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, or GERD. Thank you very much for that excellent paper, by the way. Same time, I should have commented more on that, maybe some other time.
No worries.
So that's building. And then when we become a powerhouse, when you distribute that power to others, when you get money, then when you get stronger economically, you are going to be influential, not only the seat of African Union or UNECA, but also you might claim for a seat in UN Security Council as well. So Ethiopia's gaining ground might threaten, perceived threat for others as well. So definitely that external factor is there. John, forgive me for being very blunt academically. There are also some grudges that, you know, if you remember, we had a person called Sylvia Pankhurst who was fighting for Ethiopia's independence while she was white. She was. That's why we never believe in this, you know, color difference, culture difference. We are all human beings. We belong to the family of Lucy, if you like. It is just a matter of, you know, being the weather condition or the climate. Otherwise, we are all deep down all human beings. So in the Adwa victory in 1896 in Ethiopia, defeating Italian invading colonialism, definitely also had sort of grudge for some other countries, and they like to revenge, if you like, that why should Ethiopia maintain this equality of humanity? We are superior, we are better, we are greater. So almost that mentality, John, I'm sure you may remember a person who recently passed away, an Oxford historian, who said, there is no African history as such. It is a history of Europeans in Africa. I'm sure you may recall that. And Hegel, you might think a liberated philosopher, but he said, never expect any bright, any revolutionary thinking from black or brown-eyed minds. So to be honest, I'm quoting from his book called History of Philosophy. So these then happen to sort of create sort of theme, particularly in the American concept. You can see how the Black Lives Matter really comes out from such things in the US. So that looking down on even on race-based and that colonial mentality, slave trade mentality, these all there. And why should this country called Ethiopia be struggling for equality of humanity? Human beings are not equal. We are superior. They are inferior. So such grand thinkings really are there. So not only the economic one, not only the hegemonic one, not only going through to Middle East through other countries, and I shouldn't mention on the podcast here. So it is more than simply that economic growth, but it goes back to historical injustices as well, to be honest, John, with you.
Yeah, Yonas, you're absolutely right. But, you know, again, hearing you speak about these things, these are deep-rooted things. You know, whether we talk about the internal situation in Ethiopia, which is being allowed to fester and go on so long that you could describe it as a systemic condition of the Ethiopian body politic. And then if you look at the external prejudices that you just made mention of, these are also deeply rooted in the way that the world tends to view, the continent of Africa or anyone of darker skin than themselves, so on and so forth. It is a historic truism, unfortunately. So when you're confronted by these, dare I say, social, political, historic obstacles, how do you anticipate being able to move ahead, being able to ameliorate some of the difficulties in trying to root out all of this stuff? Like, for instance, you made mention, and I won't name names either, but there is a sense. When I was working in the Middle East, there was a sense of prejudice against Ethiopians, prejudice against other African workers who went into the Arab Gulf. And these things were so deeply ingrained. When I questioned some people why this was the case, it was just like they just shrugged their shoulders and said, no, it's always been like that. You can't be trusted. You can't do this. It's like, well, no, this does not appear right, in any clear thinking way. But when you've got it so much in your heart, how do you take that out?
This takes me to a brief history of time by the Cambridge physicist who passed away again very recently, Stephen Hawking.
Yeah.
Hawking, yeah. There was a question raised by a baby boy to his mom, what the Earth is standing on. She said, there's a big total, and so then what is it standing on? It's all like that. So she couldn't go further than that. Explaining, because that turtle or that tortoise, it is carrying the whole Earth. So it is, what is it based on? Another turtle. And what about that one? Another turtle. So she has to stop somewhere.
Yeah.
Mom, can you explain to me? It's like that all the time.
Yeah.
So this primordial thinking definitely does not help us to unpack and to break the cycle, the ceiling, and start sort of revolution. I'm sure you have seen Upheaval by Jared
Diamond. Yes, I've read the book. Yeah.
You can see his 12 points in when you have human personal crisis or national crisis or global crisis. Where you should start? The first one is concede, acknowledge that there is crisis. Unless people really accept that there is really crisis in human relations, in global security relations. As 50 years research on Africa, in Aborigines, in Australia, in Canada, and 50 years, which is published in British journal, medical journal, Lancet. The conclusion was that our differences is skin deep. We are deep down. We all crave for universal values such as human rights, such as democracy, such as fairness. So these are not yet really trickled down to some people. These systemic historical things really require, like Joe, now you are engaging, for instance, like this one, open debate, discussion. And through discussion, not discussion for the sake of discussion, or what's sometimes called affirmative action. No, just honestly, there are really excellent engagements already in some countries. As I mentioned earlier, that's the 1998 Your National Solidarity. I don't know, you may remember or not.
Oh, yeah, I do. Yeah.
I had it was an excellent lesson for people who are listening to, if they can listen from their heart as well. So that prejudice, which is already made. I'm sure you might have read this Mein Kampf by Hitler himself. My experience in it, I don't remember the page, but it's the middle of the book. He would, have excellent questions. Do you really regard? Even I can't really talk this one openly here. Such people, even people, you call them human beings. You can't just avoid these things from people, but you can minimize them. These can be minimized, and through time, they can also come to a moment of aha. So I'm sorry, I have never realized that this is this. look what happened when even Obama was elected in America. I'm sure you remember.
Oh, yeah.
And expectations and reality happened to collide. Isn't people, some of them even sort of going to the level of committing suicide, seriously speaking, rather than seeing a black in the White House. You have it there. So, yeah, but your job, my job, in the intellectual, in the media, really are to fight these prejudices so as to create a better world for the future generation, including now, starting from now.
I remember very well the Obama campaign. I was actually supporting the Obama campaign from my apartment in Abu Dhabi when I was living in the Emirates, and I have to say it was a very exciting time to think that maybe this new guy is going to change politics. But again, you made mention about the universality. There's certain things about human beings that, in spite of the color of our skin or the religion that we pray to, they're universal. They cut across. And unfortunately, it was a case of I was so excited and was waiting for the turn of events in America. And then when it didn't happen, Obama appeared just like any other politician. It did not matter what his background was. It was the universality of the office of the President of the United States. So you could then say, well, okay, yes, he was America's first black president, but what did that mean? He was just a man. He was a man in office, and he didn't deliver on all the, I suppose, the pent-up anticipation of change. So yeah, I get you 100%. It's like there's this thing about us as human beings, both on a positive and a negative part of the spectrum. You can see that universality is the real principle that guides our existence here. Yeah.
Absolutely, that's the point. And even as a footnote in my previous discussion, which you rightly raised, Ethiopia's internal conflict as it has external dimension, which is absolutely excellent. And for that external dimension, again, the internal agents like now TPLF, as we raised. Some people call it, the 27 years of Ethiopian rule as proxy state, proxy government, because during 1991 May conference in London, there was a transition from military government to EPRDF. It is Herman Cohen, Undersecretary of African Affairs of the United States State Department, and they gave this TPLF conditions if they want to be in power. So for the 27 years, people call them subservient, those agents that are operating for the West, for American particularly, rather than really running the country. Now, this came out when it started to say, we are very happy to see Ethiopia is fragmenting, or the inclusion in the very constitution that nationality should secede, should go away if they don't agree to live together. Such things, John, if you are a president of Australia, you would never say that, to be honest. You'll try to have integrated Australia rather than divided Australia or broken. So this external dimension of internal conflict is really to be underlined. I'm grateful to that excellent questions you raised. And universality, absolutely.
I'm John Bruni, and you're listening to the Sage International podcast Strategicon, and we're speaking with Dr. Yonas Adeto, Director of Addis Ababa University's Center for International Peace and Security Studies. Yonas, in your paper, which I referred to earlier, you mentioned that ethno-linguistic federalism, the political system of Ethiopia, was greatly hampered by ethnic elites who seemed to do no more than exploit their position of political power over disenfranchised groups. Was ethno-linguistic federalism always an illusion?
I think that is another excellent question. As we tried to pinpoint why, in the first place, ethnic federalism to Ethiopia, why should it be introduced? As we said, it was to address the previous inequalities, in quotation mark, the previous discontent, truly I agree, the previous marginalization, the previous regions. But it remained, to use your word, illusion, because what was said and what happened definitely fell apart.
Right.
They totally contradict each other. Simple example. It's for 27 years. If you just, you might have seen the data, who was in the security, who was in the economic power, entirely the TPLF elites, not even all Tigrayans, also those who are supporting revolutionary democracy, only led by a certain group, even in Tigray. They call them the Ado dynasty, if you like. Ado, just a specific area. They say Aksum, Ado, and they have these namings. I don't go to that extent. But seriously speaking, it absolutely remained illusion. So many people, marginalized previously, thought that they were going to be in a very, at least on equal footing. But people were treated on the basis not of their delivering, not of their achievement or level of education or their contribution, but rather who they are, how much they can support TPLF agenda. As a result, it was not really equality of languages, not equality of identity, ethnic identity, but rather the hegemony of TPLF so as to execute its strategic agenda given by the West so as to destabilize Ethiopia.
Right. You also mentioned that, and I quote, ethnic federalism has generated competition between ethnic groups, mainly their aspiring elites over resources such as land, water, minerals, federal funds, and communal or religious identity, end quote. This is very much based on the old European notion of divide and rule, right? Whereby political leaders and adders can dispense favors among the regions rather than dealing with a national whole.
That's exactly it. And some authors even say TPLF ruling is simply a copy. It is a divide and rule. And they pit one ethnic group against the other, then they act as if they are mediators because they assume purport to be peacemakers. Then they keep on remote controlling and making each ethnic group, look, your language has been attacked. Look, your religion has been affected. Look, your land has been grabbed by this and that. Therefore, I am the better one for you. Let me just tell you my personal observation, which is in my PhD thesis at Bradford University, as you can definitely see it, chapter 5. In one of the southern parts where I was born and brought up, I was also, if you want me to categorize, to put into a pigeonhole, then I might also see myself as marginalized, but I can never say that because it is Ethiopian people that contributed for my education. I can't really say I'm one single person. No, I'm some total of all. It is, John, the time I speak with you now, I'm gaining something which builds my personality as well. So no man is an island is not simply a philosophy to be left out, but it is really a living philosophy as well. So in one of the meetings, the TPLF representative came there and asked the people who were in the meeting, look, we, unlike the military government, don't ask you to pay tax. We don't ask you to send your children to be soldiers and to die for what's called motherland. They would look down on that. So who do you think is better for you between the DERG, the military government, and the TPLF, EPRDF? One of the elders stood up and said, for us, Haile Selassie is better. Look, the choice given was between the military government and the TPLF government. But the wiser older person said, it is Haile Selassie's regime, that's better for us. You can't run a country without paying tax, without sending your children to be soldiers. How can you defend your national integrity? You really can see deep down the entire element that these people, the party made up was anti-Ethiopian, to be honest. And that to antagonize one ethnic group with the other so that they would act like conciliators, like peacemakers. They would forever remain rulers. The best book, second book I'm going to give you as a reference is the Ethiopia, the Last Two Frontiers by John Markakis. an excellent classical book for you to really make a reference to see those sources I'm trying to get across. So it is this divide and rule system entrenched by the TPLF regime that now brought to this current crisis, if you like.
Would better internal infrastructure linking peripheral regional townships and cities to Addis Ababa and to each other be a practical way to instill Ethiopian-ness? In other words, to instill a shared sense of national identity rather than sub-regional community?
Brilliant. In your question lies the answer itself. It's quite interesting to really focus. Here, the linchpin that brings people together, again, as Jonathan Swift must have told us, he likes philosophy because philosophy taught him comparison. By comparing, life becomes more meaningful, interesting. So people who were not in the EPRDF, people who happen to be Somali region, Afar region, Benishangul, Gambela, what's called peripheries, these peripheries in entire 27, 30 years rule of TPLF, EPRDF were marginalized altogether simply because, according to Meles' description, they are not fit enough to run Ethiopia. I'm quoting word for word from his word. Yeah. And this is also quoted in the book I mentioned to you, John Markakis, Ethiopia, the Last Two Frontiers. And now, after 2018, these people came immediately to make up EPP, Ethiopian Prosperity Party, together. Rather, no more periphery. So you are also Ethiopians. If you are elected, you can be prime ministers, presidents. This is almost, I tell you, a paradigm shift in Ethiopian politics. The linchpin that can bring together is governance to be entrenched there. And not only this regional integration with our neighboring countries, but among ourselves. The Oromos were altogether marginalized. They were labeled as chauvinists. The Amhara they were called narrowists, and the Amhara were called chauvinists by TPLF. And that definitely altogether divided. So as to bring these people, then the first one is, number one, immediately, is to recognize all the identities which are already now accepted, recognize genuinely, involve them in nation building, state building together. And now we can see them from all across Ethiopia, except TPLF definitely destabilizing Tigray. But even you can see excellent Tigrayans who are really working hard for unity of Ethiopia. Here with that, I can just mention names as well, to be honest. Professors here and leaders here. The former TPLF, the founder of TPLF, Dr. Aragawi Berhe, who is now the leader, the director of Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. There are so many constructive people, to be honest. And so the linchpin then is to discovering that fabric which brought people together. Second one, strengthening the very unity among Ethiopian people. And I would also go to the third one, to have that national sorry day, that national consensus day, just copying from Australia, because that's the best experience, to my understanding, as we have been talking with many political scientists and peace study experts as well. It's a very useful one. So I think this could serve not only the economic infrastructure, but also that psychological infrastructure, that you are Ethiopian, we are one for all for one, all for all again. So this definitely, to me, is a way of healing the wound which was inflicted by TPLF for nearly 3 decades.
Yonas, also another issue would be political parties. I mean, political parties in Ethiopia are often ethnic-based in their makeup, justifying this method because of the ethno-linguistic federal system. Do you think that creating multi-ethnic, multi-sectarian political parties, whereby members of these parties can harbour national ideological positions across ethnic lines, is possible? Do you think it's possible?
I might be wrong, but I like to be wrong by being positive. Honestly speaking, let's go to at least 3 or 4 African countries, take them as a case. Let's take Rwanda, where ethnicism was a founding principle before 1994, thanks to Belgian colonialism, which made people suspect each other, telling the Tutsis that, no, you came from Ethiopia, you know this is straighter than Hutus, so you deserve ruling, you are this, you are. That led to nearly 100,000, I'm sure you have seen nearly 1 million people be massacred. And it was all. Now, in the Rwandan constitution, organizing political party is a crime. Come to Kenyan constitution, you can't organize your political party on or under the basis of religion or ethnicity. Take Ghana's 1992 constitution. Take Zambia, take across Africa, except Ethiopia. And what's called in sociology, in psychiatry, social learning is there. We also learn from our neighbors. And those ethnically based can also be transformed into nationally based, issue-based, and Ethiopia-based, if you like, Africa-based, to be honest, human-based, ideology-based, liberal, democratic, green, different adjectives can come in. And I'm absolutely positive, as I said, preferring making what's right on the positive side. So yes, it is possible to metamorphose from that ethnic identity to national identity. Just an excellent example is NAMA, National Amhara Movement, which started. Now you can see it gradually moving on to Ethiopian movement. And also I happen to go back to AAPO, All Amhara People's Organization, change it into All Ethiopia People Organization. Already it's in Ethiopia here, to be honest. So I'm comparing both horizontally and vertically what happened in this country as well. So this metamorphosis from that worm to that beautiful butterfly seems to me inevitable.
Finally, Yonas, and I understand if you're going to have trouble addressing this aspect of our interview, but how does the current internal crisis regarding the TPLF and Tigray province affect the continuation of Ethiopia's, well, still adherence to ethno-linguistic federation?
John, to be honest, for anyone who observed Ethiopia very closely, it is very easy to answer this question. Yeah. And these people really know, particularly those TPLF, very small elite, small number of TPLF. Not even all, to be honest, not all. As I already mentioned, some founders themselves. So for them, there is no any other way than thinking in Albanian communist aspect, i.e. that of Enver Hoxha's thinking. Only one way, only Marxist, all Marxists. You know, there are so many Marxists who already changed. Marxist modern already there, and we always frequently we visit China, and we can really see very revolutionary change. So these people really are already fixed, not volunteer to change at all. We personally discussed with some of them. I'm sure you might hear this podcast as well. I wrote mention the name only. We took 2 to 3 hours. Why they should not behave according to the century. You can't treat your children the way you were treated because they belong to a different generation.
Right.
We have gone not to national identity questions. Now, a question of climate devastating the whole world, unless we are united. Poverty, unless we are united. Look at people dying in Mediterranean, in Sahara Desert, in search of greener pasture in Europe. These are our children. They are dying. So why don't we change this constitution and give them freedom of movement in their own country, from Tigray to Oromia, to south, to west, to east? Why don't you think again and reform yourselves?
See, this is it. Gosh, where have you been all these years? I was on radio a few years ago, and we were talking about the migration crisis. We were actually going to do a big an international migration crisis conference here in Adelaide. But anyway, the fact of the matter was that I was on radio and I was called in and said, well, John, with all these migrants, they can't just all go to Europe and do this, that, and the other. And, what about the people in Europe itself? They're going to be displaced. And I said to them, well, quite frankly, I'm surprised that no one has actually backed reasonable people in parts of Africa, in parts of Latin America, in parts of Central Asia. Those are the hope that we won't have people migrating in mass towards North America or Europe, because they won't have to go that far to find paradise. They can stay home, work, achieve, educate, feed themselves, and have houses where they live. But no one seems to, and aid budgets are always skewed in order to give band-aid measures to people who have already left with the idea that maybe the grass is greener in Europe or in North America or in Australia. When in actual fact, we need to actually try to address the political situation on the ground to give nation states a proper basis for liberal democracy, for instance. That will be how you solve issues. You can't solve issues any other way.
Absolutely. That's why I said in your question lies the answer itself earlier. So it is sometimes to be taken as even a rhetorical question rather than, because you really have it. And absolutely, so you must make policy change, make your country work, make your governance work. Should be responsive to the changing and emerging situations. If you are always fixed, revolutionary democracy is the only way. No, there's nothing as such in philosophy of science. Nothing is perfect. In this living world, we are changing. We all are changing. Things are changing. So you go back to the ABC of philosophy. You can't step in the same water twice. It's changed. You have changed. Time has changed. If you are really serious about not disappearing like dinosaurs from the face of the earth, then we should be changing the changing world as well.
Right. That's an excellent point to end on. Thank you very much, Yonas, for your time and for being on Strategicon.
Thank you, John, very much indeed for having me for this excellent discussion as well.
Thank you. My thanks to Strategicon producer Tim Whiffen and to the Ozcast Network. And to our audience, thanks for listening. We hope that you'll join us for our next exciting adventure through the world of geopolitics. Remember that you can subscribe to the audio version of Strategicon through the Ozcast Network, iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, and Spotify. And please like us on the Sage International Facebook site and follow us on Twitter. We appreciate your support. You can also watch our podcasts on video through the Strategicon Raw YouTube channel when they're available, easily accessed by clicking on the link provided on our website. Also, please comment on any of our articles and podcasts through Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and of course on the Sage International site. We welcome any constructive feedback that can help improve our products, and we look forward to engaging with our followers. If you would like to support Strategicon, remember to hit the like button on our social media channels, and please give us a review on your favorite podcasting platform. Until next time, goodbye.
Connect with your potential customers wherever they are. Effective uses Comcast viewership data insights to combine advanced targeting capabilities with premium TV and streaming content, so you can deliver the best ad experiences to your audience no matter how they watch. Visit EFFECTV.com.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.